Hi, I'm Guy Lawrence, and you are listening to the Guy Lawrence podcast. If you're enjoying this content and you want to find out more and join me and come further down the rabbit hole, make sure you head back to guylawrence.com.au. Awesome, guys. Enjoy the show. Sky, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Guy, it's great to meet you and see you in person here.
Yeah, totally. I ask everyone on the show, if you were on an aeroplane sitting next to a complete stranger and they asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
To be honest, let me just tell you a story that's true. Um, Probably what I would do is wait for the right moment to. If I have my ukulele with me, I might stand up and play a song on the plane, or take a moment to talk to all the neighbors and stand up and share an announcement about what I'm doing with my book. So like breaking through those kind of social barriers at times when it feels right and of service has
Yeah.
been a journey of learning for me, because I do feel like there's a way in which these are the barriers that keep us from solving some of the greater issues that we're being forced to confront in our world right now as we get more interconnected and there's more people interacting all the time. When we're afraid to speak up about something in the world, whether it's in our personal life or something that impacts all of us, it stops us from being able to make a change.
Yeah, totally.
So
So
the
I was gonna,
description would be
yeah,
I'm a physicist who studies the foundations of quantum mechanics and has tried to link that study to the everyday world and show that what we would expect to see if quantum mechanics applies to the world is synchronicity in our lives, meaningful coincidences that lead us into flow.
amazing. Now, if I was sitting next to you, I'd absolutely geek out on this because I'd be just, oh my God, that is synchronicity right here. And I'd chew your ear off for hours, which
Yeah.
why
Well,
we're
that
on the
would be a
podcast.
synchronicity between us. Yeah.
Yeah. But what kind of look do you get normally from what you just said? You know, the moment you mentioned quantum mechanics and synchronicity and a physicist, like, do you get interest or do you just get blank looks? Or
Yeah. A lot of folks are really excited about cosmology, or the science of what we're doing in this world. Like people get a sense of awe and wonder from that, and they really feel like they don't understand it, and but they're interested. So I would say the majority of people I talk to have some connection to like wondering about more about why they're here and what the world it really is.
yeah,
We're put in this place that it feels like there's no manual. We know now that we're like at the center of this on this sphere called the Earth, in the middle of the galaxy that's huge, and in the midst of so many galaxies we can't even count them, not much less the stars in the galaxy. The galaxies around the galaxy are uncountable, and it just leaves you with a sense of wonder and complete like mind blown. Like, what am I supposed to make of that? So I think that a lot of folks really do relate to being able to talk about these things that I spend all my time thinking about.
yeah, amazing. And so, how does one then end up studying quantum mechanics, becoming a physicist, and looking at synchronicities and flow? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, it's a pretty strange roundabout path. Most people end up sort of diverging at different points, but for me, I I started out both interested in science and interested in my own spiritual understanding, like who am I and why am I here? Like growing up with the suffering of my childhood, which was not that much, but we all suffer as kids. We're like, why is this happening to me? Why did I end up in a group of people that don't like me? Or why does my brother or sister pick on me? Or it's not fair. We grapple with the issues of fairness in life. And I really asked those questions. Like I got the message from people that were around me that like my stepdad told me life isn't fair, but I wanted to understand that. Like, what's the inner experience of that? And how do I make sense of the suffering that I see around me and the people that I see not getting along with each other and the problems that that's causing in the world? So all those questions had a big impact on me. And I studied I was introduced to Eastern spiritual traditions early on.
Huh.
And I also found some other traditions on my own when I was a high schooler and just blossoming into that world on my own. And then I discovered science and physics in high school and college, and it's another way to study the fundamentals of who we are, space and time. And you know, the great thing about studying science, physics, is that the first thing you study is space and time. You know, I used to be a teacher, and the first day of class, we'd take a ruler for these ninth graders, and we'd take cars that had a little battery and would move like really slow. And we'd take rulers and measure out with a stopwatch and a ruler how far it traveled in a certain amount of time on the ground, just moving along the ground. And we'd find speed from that, and we'd start to do measurements and understand what space and time are. So it's the first thing we did on day one of class. And yet, as a studying, practicing physicist, doing research, the last thing we come back to is, okay, so what really is space and time? Nobody really knows. There's a great book that just came out by Carlo Rovelli, an Italian physicist, called The Order of Time. It's very popular. Okay. So these are questions that are not answered. And I gradually came to experience more coincidences in my life and started to realize that those were a spiritual experience, but that they must also be explainable by science. Like, how did I end up connecting with you right here at this particular time? Or how did I end up bumping into my wife by accident when we didn't know each other that well, but we were in Paris. We meant to meet in Greece, and I got sick and had to head home, and we ended up bumping into each other in Paris. And it was like this life-changing experience that ended up leading us to eventually getting married. You know, how did those things happen? They cross the line between spirituality, because they affect us deeply and they're very meaningful, and science, because they involve real people and things doing certain things in the physical world.
Yeah. Do you think I keep thinking about those two terms, science and spirituality, and for me, I kind of grew up with neither. Mm-hmm. You know, in Wales, like it was just nothing, religion, nothing, you know, it was just almost like you said, just trying to figure it all out for myself. And over the years, it's kind of, I felt like there's been almost a stigma attached to the spiritual world or realm, and there's, from a Western mind, it can be like, yeah, just woo-woo, what the hell's going on over there? And then you got the scientists in science had the hardcore science, but then sometimes it almost feels quite mechanical and not a connection to something either. I mean, from your experiences, do you think these worlds are merging thanks to, you know, quantum mechanics and quantum physics and the things that you kind of looking at, or is there still a big divide?
Well, there's still a big divide. I think that there's real reasons for physicists to be skeptical of the connection. And I validate and honor those reasons, because there hasn't been made a convincing, legitimate, foundational theoretical approach to what the world really is, and how it has both spiritual aspects that we interpret as, you know, spiritual and inner and meaning based, and physical aspects. Like, that case has not been made. And so it is appropriate to be skeptical and to react to some of the, what we call in physics, hand wavy ideas. Like, well, so then in the end, you know, it's just kind of all connected. Like just saying that doesn't actually connect the dots for people. And I think if people are not convinced, it's actually on me or whoever is in the role to say, okay, I haven't reached you yet. So what am I not covering? What have I not convincingly, you know, presented? That's the passionate work that I have to do. I want to connect those worlds. I think it can be done. And the work I'm doing tries to show that it tries to untangle some of the assumptions that physicists make about the way the world works. Because physicists make assumptions that reinforce their worldview. And that's a weakness, I think, that we tend to have. And so and we're constantly trying to untangle those assumptions. We don't take them for granted. Like, we know that we're making assumptions, but sometimes we get lost and we realize that, like in quantum mechanics, there's this assumption that's made that we know that quantum mechanics basically says that any system you're not observing, any object you're not observing, will branch into like a tree of possibilities. They're called eigenstates. So if you send like an electron through a specific type of magnetic field, it will branch into a possibility of going up and a possibility of going down. And both those possibilities, they sort of coexist in this possibility space. And the mathematics says that really applies at all levels. It doesn't go away when you add up a bunch of electrons to get a human being. But we've made this obvious assumption, this observation that people don't diverge into multiple paths. Like when you walk out the door, you don't go part of you left and part of you right, or a possibility of you going left and right. Like we don't see that. So there's this obvious observation that's made that that doesn't apply. And then we've spent about 80 years trying to explain why it doesn't apply and why quantum mechanics falls apart at the macroscopic level. But by thinking about it a lot, I think I've untangled some of that argument to show that it does indeed apply. But you never actually see those quantum branches of an electron. You always, when you observe an electron, you always get one branch. So the question arises, what would you actually expect to see if you, Guy, were on multiple branches of a tree? What would I expect to see if I was observing you? And what I would expect to see is you, just as you are. The question is, what would be, how would I describe you before I saw you? Because quantum mechanics is the study of what the world is doing when you're not watching. That's what makes it so interesting. And can you think about what the world is doing when you're not watching it? Yeah. It's a lot of assumptions, right? You assume the world is doing what it's doing, but you don't know because you're not watching it by definition. And quantum mechanics says that in that case, everything branches into possibilities. And so then the study of synchronicity is tying those together and saying, okay, when we're coming into the world, into a world of possibilities, how is it that we end up connecting with one of those branches versus a different one?
I love it. And then depending on how we are being, we're increasing a particular probability into our life. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's really well said.
Yeah.
There's a process that I call meaningful history selection. So we're selecting out the histories that are meaningful to us. And by meaningful, I mean they align with what we've chosen. So I can give you an example of this. This is a really simple example of going to the hardware store with my daughter. And I was looking to fix a sprinkler head. I had this sprinkler that was putting off too much water and it was draining, the water pressure from the rest of the yard. And I wanted to replace it with something that was like very low water pressure. So it was a simple errand, but I get to the store with my daughter and, there's like a rack of shelves with all these different sizes and colors and brands of sprinkler heads. And my daughter is like 6 years old at the time, and she's kind of chatting away while I'm trying to solve this problem and getting kind of overwhelmed by all the options. And she taps me on the shoulder and says, Daddy, can I go, look at the key guy, the guy who's making keys over there? And I said, hold on just a minute. I got to just wait, please. I'm getting kind of impatient. I'm trying to concentrate on the shelves. And finally she taps me again and she says, Daddy. I say, honey, and I'm all about to get mad at her, right? But I look down at her and she's saying, will this work? She's holding up this little white piece of plastic. And I sort of have a moment of about to get upset at her. And then I decide to be calm and compassionate. And I say, kind of condescendingly, honey, what I'm looking for is very specific. It's got to be the right size. And then I even stop that and I take a look and I say, well, what do you have? And I look at it and it's a cap to cap off a sprinkler. It's not actually a sprinkler head. And I say, well, that's great, but what I'm looking for is actually a sprinkler head. And then I stop myself and I realize actually a cap would work really well. A cap would actually solve my problem perfectly because I don't need that pressure at all in that area. And if I cap it off, it'll give me back the water pressure everywhere else. And so the solution presented itself through my daughter, who had no idea what my problem that I was trying to solve was. And the question is, where did she get that piece from? She found it in between the two buckets just sitting alone on the shelf. So how did that piece get there into her path for her to pick it up and decide on that one and give it to me and solve my problem? Yeah. And I would call that a synchronicity. The whole chain of events and this meaningful history selection is about how in the moment, there's all these possible branches of history leading to where I am. But they're undetermined, right? There's all these branches that I haven't decided which one is true yet. And decided is not quite the word, right? I'm not consciously controlling this. But when I actually interact with my daughter and she finds that piece, one of those branches gets selected, the one on which that piece ended up to be where it was. Because how did it get there? Maybe some guy the day before got frustrated with finding it on the ground and set it there, or didn't know where to put it, so set it there. there's lots of ways that history can unfold to bring that piece of plastic to where it was, and then my daughter to give it to me. So the synchronicity is about how do the histories of everything else in the world unfold in meaningful ways so that I can interact with the most meaningful ones.
Got it. And with that then, because synchronicity is an interesting thing, and I love the fact that, like, looking at your book as well, you know, you're intertwining synchronicity with flow. And for me, a lot about with flow is being able to almost stay in the truth of who I am, and things present themselves along the way, an opportunity, and be willing to be open to that. I mean, how far have you taken this work? I mean, do you live your life by looking for synchronicity and living in flow and trusting that process? Because I think for me personally, it was very difficult to kind of let go of the old self to find these states and actually trust them. And because sometimes we're meted by things that our rational brain doesn't even make sense of, and we could dismiss it quite easily.
Yeah. Well, so sort of two ways I want to approach that. One is a story of synchronicity, of being in flow. And then the other is touching into what it feels like to be uncertain in life, and because the flow really brings up a lot of uncertainty. We can't really know where we're going to be next if we're in flow. If we want to know where we're going to be next, we're going to get out of flow, because that's like creating our own path, even with disregard for what's actually happening in the world around us. And flow is about an alignment between what's going on inside me and what the world is showing me. And the benefit of flow is that possibilities that I couldn't myself imagine become possible because I'm actually interacting with the world in a novel way, in real relationship. But for me, living in flow is definitely something that I practice, and that's really the hard part of this work, is not just intellectualizing it and saying, like, here's the theory of how synchronicity works, but here's how it shows up and challenges us to be more in relationship to life and to people, so that we can be more fulfilled by those relationships and get to more harmony with each other. So there's an example that I have of that I wanted to tell of getting into flow, and so often opportunities come up that I miss because I've got preconceptions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think I know how things are supposed to go, and I say no to an opportunity that I realize afterwards I should have said yes to. So I was in graduate school. I have a master's degree from San Francisco State University in physics, and it was in that program. I would commute by 2.5 hours by bus to get there twice a week, and I was really enjoying being there and being part of the student body community of physics students. And there was a camping trip that was going to happen in the first couple of weeks of school. And I was really excited about attending the camping trip because it was a chance to get outdoors with people and have a good time and make some bonding, some new friends. But I have a daughter and a family, and we live 2.5 hours away. And I thought, well, there's no way I can go on a camping trip on some weekend and compete with traffic and be away from my family or bring them with us. Like, it's too hard. And so the camping trip was approaching, and I just didn't even look into it. But in my core, here's the important thing. In my core, if I took the time, the statement is, I do want to do the camping trip. Okay. So if we check in with ourselves and if we can get clear without these stories about why it's not possible, like, put those aside for a moment and just check in. What do I really feel? It doesn't mean I'm going to do it, but what do I feel? What I feel is I want to do the camping trip. And that's pretty clear for me. But then 2 days before the trip, the student asked me, are you going to go on the trip? And I said, well, I can't because I just live too far away. And, and then I caught myself again. This is a process. the process is LORRAX, LORRAX. Listen, open, reflect, release, act, and don't give up. So the first step is listening, right? Listening to life. And here I was listening to this person, and she's asking if I'm going to go camping, and then opening my mind. Well, maybe I should find out more about the trip. And so I asked, where's it going to be? And she says, oh, it's going to be up at the observatory on Mount Baldy. I was like, wait a minute. Mount Baldy is like 10 minutes from my house. So you're coming to me to go camping. It didn't even occur to me that that would be the case. And so immediately I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. And then I realized as I got home that my daughters, there's a second part to this synchronicity, by the way. My daughters had a birthday party the next day at a friend's house. And I thought, I really wanted her to come camping and I wanted to be at the party with her. And I thought there's no way to do both. So long story short, when I finally inquired as to where that was, it was a 5-minute walk down the trail on Mount Baldy at the picnic grounds the next day. So we spent the night and then the next day walked down the trail and attended the birthday party. So this is how flow can unfold to make life, in this case, just more meaningful, more rich for me, to have an experience camping with an observatory telescope with my friends and then at a birthday party with my daughter and get to experience all of that. And what was really evident was that I almost got in the way of all that because I was afraid.
Yeah. And that's where the uncertainty can come in, right?
Yeah.
And could you just touch on what you said again? Because that was a question for me anyway, the LORRAX, because I think it's really great to have, like you said, to have an infrastructure to break down so you kind of know that you can lean into this flow state and not just kind of go with the flow,
Yeah.
per se, you know?
Yeah.
So the LORRAX.
Yeah.
Was it
Yeah.
LORRAX?
So the first two things I did there was listen to what's being said.
Yeah.
You know, listen or observe or notice. Notice is a really good word. Like it could be, you know, I just lost my job, or it could be my spouse just got angry at me for something. Like any event in life can trigger the need to just notice what's happening, listen to life, especially when we've got some emotional reaction, like some resistance saying, no, that can't be that way, or I've got to fight back. So that's when we stop and listen. So listening is about pausing life long enough to then open our minds. And opening our mind is important because usually we come at the world, at least I do, with preconceptions. You know, my spouse is angry because whatever, or I've got to defend myself because otherwise, you know. And so listening and then opening. And then once we've done that, we have the chance to reflect. And this can take some time. And reflecting is the chance where we get to see how our own goals, to really think about what our goals are in the situation, which are often not accessible to us right away, like in a flash. We have to take some time and say, well, what do I really want here? And in the case of camping, what I really wanted was to be connected to the students and to be able to go on the trip. And once I've done that, like I encourage people to have ready to think about on a regular basis, what are the core things you're wanting in life right now? Like, do you want, like, be honest with yourself and be clear, like prioritize. For me, I want to have a strong, healthy family relationship with my daughter and my spouse. I want people in my family to feel good and strong. I want to have my work and my book be of value and of service to people, and for me to feel fulfilled with that, to do the work necessary. And I want to have my research, you know, be part of what I'm doing, and I want to have close relationship with a couple of friends, you know, and whatever's, and I want to make a difference on the world. You know, I want to follow things like the Amazon rainforests and the painful things that I really care about that are happening in the world that I'd like to contribute to. So, but that's like it. That's my list. So finding what are the 3 or 4 things that are really, that you're working on right now. And actually you can even be more specific. Like I named some really big things, but actually right now, one of the things I really care about is hitting a deadline for next Sunday when I'm going to be playing music for an event. Like out of the next 7 days, I want to make sure that I'm preparing for that. Like I want to prioritize that. And so in the reflection process, I've got that on my list of this is what's important to me right now. And once I've listened to the situation, opened my mind and reflected on what are my real needs and goals, I might have a different perspective on what's appropriate action. So in this case, when I learned that the camping trip was near my house, I could see that it made sense for me to try and go. And then there's a step of releasing, which incidentally I added later on in the development of the process, because I realized that at this point, even once I know kind of what I need to do, like I know that the camping trip makes sense for me, I'm still attached to not going. because I've been planning for like 2 weeks not to go. So I have other things in my head that I'm going to do that night, or I've got other reasons why it's difficult to just pack up my sleeping bag, and my daughter's birthday party thing that was happening was another reason why I had to let go of all that stuff, because now I had new information that required me to release my attachments in order to then make a new action. So once I've listened and opened and reflected and released those attachments and assumptions, I can then choose an action. In this case, you could say it was to go on the camping trip, but you could also just say the action was to go home and talk to my wife about it and find out if there was a way to make the birthday party work. But I wouldn't have done that action if I hadn't have stopped and paused and listened and opened and reflected.
Yeah.
And then this process just keeps going, right? It shows up, it's happened, it can take 10 seconds, or I've had it take over a year for this whole process to unfold, where I didn't realize what the purpose or meaning of an event was in my life for a long time. And it comes full circle, and I realize I've got to take some action on it.
Yeah.
The key point is not to quit. So the X stands for don't give up on any of these goals. Just keep going through this cycle.
Yeah, that's a bit so well laid out, and I think there's a couple of things that sprung to my mind when you said all that. Is one for me is being able to have the humility to know that sometimes you need to just be with it. And somebody said to me a long time ago, "Would you rather be right or happy?" And quite often, I was always wanting to just be right, in any situation.
Were you talking to me or my ego?
Yeah, exactly.
My ego wants to be right.
And the other thing as well is the release, and that having that detachment from something can that can be. But when you fully when you can fully let go. I often think about we live close to some surf beaches here and things, and there's times where you find yourself in these states and you can fully detach from all your worries, your problems, and you find these beautiful states. And then when you come out, synchronicities occur and things start to appear. It keeps me in awe, and it always reminds me of these things.
Well, I'm really going through that process with myself. I want to sort of feel into how that's been showing up for me. The question of mistakes, I think, is really valuable. One of the things that keeps me out of flow is when I feel like I've made a mistake. And the thing about mistakes for me is that they tie into really old patterns of what I learned when I was younger about what happens if I make a mistake. I feel like if I make a mistake, my friends might ditch me if I say something wrong, or somebody, my parent might give me the cold shoulder and I'll be abandoned. So what happens for me in my growth process lately, I've been sort of working on the next phase for my research, and trying to figure out where support is going to come from and where my network is going to be for that. And I've noticed a lot of inner dialogue or difficulty, or what's the word, noise, and things like fear and anxiety and stress, and then when I've got that going on, and then I make a mistake, it could be anything, but I don't say something right on an interview or something, and my mind takes that information and mixes it all together and says, well, now you've made this mistake. It's going to mean that all these fears, all these things you're afraid of, are going to happen. And then suddenly I'm stuck in this place of out of flow, because from this place I don't have access to a part of me that is creative or optimistic, or able to work with difficulty and have grit and keep the work going. It's a part of me that wants to fold in and give up. And this is such a key place where, to get back into flow, there are tools we can use, like the LORRAX process, or another tool that I find really valuable that I talk about in my course that I'm leading, is how to really feel those chattering feelings of fear or anxiety. Because as long as we're spending energy pushing them away, like if my fear is saying you're going to fail and be broke, or you're going to be laughed at or whatever, and I'm pushing that away because I just don't want to hear it, I'm spending all my energy pushing that away.
Mm.
And so there's tools that I've worked through that allow me to have the strength and the openness to feel that possibility and not resist what it would feel like to fail. What would that feel like to me? To experience that in my body. And I would say it's a sensation in my chest. You know, I don't want to use the word feeling too much because people have different notions of what that is, but it's a sensation in my chest. Like I actually experience a sensation in my chest. And when I can do that, then I can breathe again. And it's like I'm standing in a tunnel and all I can see is the end of the tunnel. And it's got this fearful thing on it and I'm just obsessed. But when I can feel the emotion in my chest, I can start to back out of the tunnel and look around me and realize I still have a lot of options. And that's when I can get back into flow. Because I can see that, oh yeah, well tonight I'm invited to this thing and it's going to make me feel more connected to my community and more like I have more possibilities in my life. And that's going to allow me to get more work done. That's the only thing that's going to get me back in motion towards my goals.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. I always, when I see fears coming up, like exactly like you say, I'm always curious now to try and be the witness and be the observer and have that perspective of looking at what's going on in my body. And quite often I've noticed that there's so many well-trained behaviors that start to come up. And like you say, if we become more and more observant to them and not frightened to feel what it is, it's been a huge difference. And it's amazing how much we are frightened to feel something as well, you know, and then of course we make choices and actions daily to avoid those things. And
That's true. And I think that there's this really tricky switch of I would call this a spiritual dilemma. Whether you want to call it spiritual or not, it totally doesn't matter. But it's a dilemma it's a mirage kind of, where I tend to think that the real thing I'm trying to learn here is how to do XYZ in the world. You know, how to be more this or be more that, and so I can be successful either in my relationship or with my job or with my creative work that I'm doing. I think that I know what it is I'm supposed to learn here, and I've got actually kind of a story about why I'm not able to. Like I've always got some reason why this thing I'm trying to get better at, I'm just not good enough at it, or you know, something like that. And yet I wonder, and I've had reinforced sometimes, whether what's really being taught is how we handle ourselves when we make mistakes, how compassionate we are with ourselves, how much we're able to deal with ambiguity and to be on our own side, even when we do something which we're afraid is going to undermine our physical safety, to stay in the court with ourselves. And I find that usually what I do habitually is I try and address my fears by beating myself up about some mistake I made. I think I just learned to do that when I was younger. It was a coping mechanism. Like the only person I know I can really change is me, so I'm going to try and change myself so much every time something bad happens that it doesn't happen again. And the learning then for me now is not to try and fix myself in the outer world and keep just trying to narrow myself into a better and better box of more skills and more, you know, handling things just right. This really rigid conception of what it means to be me. But actually, how do I feel about myself and what I'm doing in the world? And because that actually isn't really about me. In the end, when I'm able to be more compassionate with myself, I find my relationship with my daughter is just way different. My relationship with my wife is way different. And all my relationships and all my actions tend to have more spaciousness and more room for wonderful things to emerge.
Yeah. Amazing.
So it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, but I hear you. I hear you. A question cropped in there, and with your science background, I'd be intrigued to know what you think about this. But do you think, are we victim to circumstance, or is there an element that we're actually creating our reality around us?
That's a great question. This is the beauty, and I think the most important skill that I take away from the study of synchronicity. When I can trust that the synchronicity is working in the world, this process of meaningful history selection, where the choices I make, and this is how it works, I make choices because I have some kind of anticipated experience I want to have. I want to experience being at a play on time, so I run for the train. And my actions are driven by some anticipated experience that I want to experience. That influences the branches of the tree so that the ones that are more likely to get me to the play on time become more likely to happen. And I end up maybe getting a synchronicity which helps me. And so bring me back to your question. What was your question again?
So are we a victim to circumstance, essentially?
Right. So the cosmos then is responsive. It's responding to the choices we're making. And if we can see every event that shows up in life as part of that process, then we can actually be ready to learn from life at any moment and in really meaningful ways. I don't mean just making the best of a bad situation, but actually looking at situations and saying, what I have to stand to gain from this situation is actually what I need to learn right now. Like, this is the thing I need to work on. I just trust that, because this wouldn't be happening otherwise. So, you know, if I've got a girlfriend or boyfriend that's breaking up with me, like, it takes a lot of spaciousness in ourselves to say, okay, this is really painful, but I actually trust that this is what needs to happen right now for me to get to my next level of who I want to be in the world. So a lot of times this, and I want to present a caveat that I come from a privileged background. You know, I feel safe in my house, and I have generally enough resources to make choices in my life. And there are a lot of people that don't have those kind of freedoms. So I'm not suggesting that we apply this without any questioning to every single circumstance. In science, we take a simple situation, like, you know, where there's not all the big constraints, and we say, well, how does this work? And I'm trying to suggest that in general, circumstances in our life show up when they need to. And our job is to look at those circumstances and say, okay, what is this showing me? Where is this leading me? And so we become not victims to circumstance, because we actually are grateful for whatever the circumstance is and what we can do with it.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm giving it a different meaning. I got a couple of questions I ask everyone on the show, Sky. I'd be interested to hear. Just aware of the time. What's been a low point in your life that you've had, but looking back later, it's been a blessing?
You know, there's a lot, I guess I would say. But I don't mean that in a way that is victim-y. I mean that in a way that, you know, I think I certainly have a lot to learn coming into this world, and I've been committed to learning it as best I can. I would say, you know, 8 or 9 years ago, I had an experience where I was really working hard on being a professional musician. And I think objectively, I was being pretty successful. I had a group of people with me that were playing with me that were really believed in what we were doing, and I was building momentum. And I had a set of experiences happen that triggered a sense of insecurity in me and discouragement. And I essentially just sort of pushed it away and was like, this isn't happening. And I told myself that it just wasn't working. Now, I think it might have been working, and I don't have any evidence anymore because that opportunity went away. But because I stepped away from the opportunity, it didn't come to fruition. And I ended up going down a different path. So one of the things that I think synchronicity really teaches us, and that is really the core essence of the course that I'm teaching, the Living in Flow course, is about how we make choices. We're all making choices all the time. And at this particular low point, I saw two choices. One, to just keep working on the dream I had, and the other was to let it go because it just wasn't working. And when I chose to let it go, that's what ended up happening. And looking back, I have a lot of sadness around that. Now, at this time in my life, I've reached that point again and recognize the same feeling come up, like, oh, this isn't working. I've missed my chance. And because of that previous experience, I feel a little different. I feel a stronger sense of determination and a stronger sense of self-determination. Like, it's up to me. It's not up to like the external world to tell me whether or not this is going to work. It's up to me. And it's helped me get through this place of real difficulty inside myself, real self-doubt and discouragement, to discover a new level of solidity and strength that comes from within me. And I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't gone through that experience 9 years ago.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. What does your morning routine look like?
Well, when I started writing my book, and I got really committed to writing every day. That was part of the practice that led to me having a book and getting published. And an hour each day, like no matter what, or more, but certainly an hour no matter what, of uninterrupted time, 60 minutes. And the best time for me to do that was before anyone else in the house got up. So I would get up at 5 or 5:30 in the morning and write. And I still have that habit. It's usually not 5, it's usually closer to 5:30 or 6:30. But I love it. It's hard, it's like I do want to sleep, but I like getting up. It's this lovely period of time where I get in flow. I definitely get in flow then. And that's why I do it. And so I'll do that. And then when it's time to wake up my daughter, I'll get her up, and my wife will get up, and we'll make breakfast and sort of urge her along to get to school and then get her out the door and get to settle into how I'm going to be creative this day, or what tasks I needed to take care of.
Yeah.
And get into flow as best I can.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm an early bird too. And definitely my best part of the day for sure. So it's like, it was 7 a.m. for this podcast as well. So
right. That's right.
Yeah, it's good. If you could have dinner with anyone tonight, anywhere in the world, from any time frame, who do you think it would be and why?
Right now I'm going to say Jason Silva.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with Jason Silva. He is a guy who is a philosopher, and he speaks about the reimagining of awe and wonder in our lives, and the importance of, what I really feel to be true, that we are languishing in a sense of what is the meaning of our lives, and where do we fit, and how do we make change in a world that doesn't seem to be responding to us. And he says we do that by re-enlivening a sense of awe and wonder in our lives. And that gives us back autonomy and a sense of purpose. And he does it so well, and so in such an empowering and connected way that I learn from him every time I watch his videos.
Yeah, fantastic. And with everything we've covered today, like we've talked covered a lot. What would you like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
I'd encourage, what encourages me is that flow is a process by which I don't have to sacrifice what I need in order to make someone else happy or solve the problems of the world. And I don't have to sacrifice the problems of the world in order to make myself happy. These things all come together. Like all of the problems that we're facing right now collectively are actually an outgrowth of not living in flow. As amazing as that may seem, it's all a result of not being able to tap into what is my purpose in the world and how am I showing up. So the more we can strip away layers of conditioning as individuals and can come into flow with each other, the more we also create that kind of flow and harmony in our relationships, and that ripples out into the dialogues that happen between nations and in Congress and in governments. And all of those things are related to the way that we relate as human beings, and that is related to whether we are able to access a sense of awe and wonder and flow.
Beautiful, beautiful. And for us Aussies, mate, are we able to get a copy of your book? Like, is it been, or do we ship it from the US?
That's a good question. It's available in a lot of bookstores. It's distributed by Penguin Random House.
Okay.
And it's available online as well. So I definitely have had some readers in New Zealand and Australia. And so check out your local bookstore. If it's not there, ask them if they can order it, because a lot of times they can.
Yeah.
And that certainly is awesome when we get requests like that.
Yeah, of course. And I use Booktopia as well over here. And I think that ships, I think it ships from the UK, but it gets you quicker than some of the Aussie shipping companies as well. So
great. Yeah, you can find out more about the book at the website, livinginflowbook.com. And I also have this course that I'm putting together, which is a video course, which takes you from a place of feeling stuck or disempowered in your life and connects you with tools and resources to be able to make choices based on what your heart is really aiming for, and to see synchronicities as stepping stones to get there. You know, synchronicities that show up as stepping stones today, like what's right in front of you, can be a clue to how to get to what you're after.
Yeah, beautiful.
So you can find out more about that at the website, www.thethetteryoutthrivehere.com/livinginflow.
/Living in Flow. Will it link from your main website as well? Because
yes,
I know people will remember Living in Flow for sure.
It will. Livinginflowbook.com.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Sky, thank you so much for coming on today, mate. I really appreciate everything you're doing, and I'm so glad you reached out and connected. And,
thanks, Guy. It's great to make your acquaintance too. I really appreciate what you're doing, and we're learning from each other.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.